sway bar installation tips. There are many tutorials on how to install sway bars. However, what separates a professional from the average person are the following pro tips. Let's begin. For the average person, the hardest part about installing sway bars is compressing the bushing. What I mean by that is there is a circular rubber bushing around the sway bar, and you are then going to have to sandwich it between two pieces of metal and squeeze it together. Okay, so for example, this circular piece of metal is going to go underneath. This piece of metal is going to go over the top. So we have effectively sandwiched the bushing between two pieces of metal. Now, the average person, their mistake is trying to do it by hand. It would take anywhere from 50 to 200 pounds of force squeezing these two pieces of metal together in order to slide this bolt through the first piece of metal and the second piece of metal. So they would squeeze with 200 pounds of force, barely enough to get this through both pieces of metal. Then they would secure it with a nut, and they would do it to the upper side as well. That is a mistake. You are taking a 30-minute job and you are turning it into a potentially 5-hour job and potentially dropping 100 F-bombs. So, I'm here to make sure you do not make the same mistake. The key thing you have to remember is, in order to compress these two pieces of metal together, one, I would say use pliers to squeeze these two pieces of metal together, or a vise, or a C-clamp of some type to compress these two pieces of metal together in order to get this bolt through and secure the nut. That is a very important concept to remember. If it's on the car and you're underneath it, it's going to be even more difficult. But just remember the key concept of using tools to compress it. In our case right now, because it is off the vehicle, I have the luxury of cheating, so to speak. To compress it or put on this half, I'm just simply going to put all of my weight on it. Okay. And again, I weigh about 200 pounds, so you could say I kind of cheated right now, because you're not always going to have that luxury if it's installed underneath your car and you're working on it. But yeah, it's stuck on, but I did step on it with 200 pounds of force. So that's a form of compression. We're going to do the top one. I'm going to have to push down. And what we're going to do is we're going to secure one end. We're going to put it through sheet, this part, and we're going to secure it to the second piece of metal. And then we're going to secure it with a nut. Okay. I'm sorry, this nut. So now that we have one side secure, the final part we have to secure is this part right here. We're going to have to squeeze these last pieces of metal together to fit this bolt through both of them. And then we're going to secure it. Okay. Again, it's the same principle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a screwdriver, put it through both holes. So now it's kind of like we're aligning it. Once we align it, we could then use some type of vise or pliers to compress it together. These two pieces of metal, compress it together while lining it up. And while it's being compressed, take the bolt and you just slide it right through. And then put the nut on. So you can compress it with pliers, a vise, or even a C-clamp. And that is the trick to installing sway bars. Irrespective of what car you have, just remember that concept of using a tool for compression, securing one side, and using a screwdriver to line up both holes while compressing it with something. While it's being compressed, you slip this bolt through, lock it down with a nut. If you follow these tips, you're going to be okay. Until next time, take care, everyone.